Well, Real Housewives of Orange County star Tamra Judge has just announced that she has a later in life autism diagnosis. And she says that that's the reason that she lacks empathy. Um, a lot of thoughts about it. I hope you're ready for it. Today may get a little spicy, but let's dive in. You're listening to No Filter with Zach Peter, your go-to source for all the latest pop culture and reality TV tea, served fresh all week long. Now, let's dive in. Hi, guys. Welcome on in. Welcome on in. Welcome on in. I hope you guys are having a great start to your week. Thank you again for all the sweet messages about my grandfather. He passed away on Thursday. It's been last week was a really challenging week for my family, and obviously, as we head into the services, it's still gonna uh, still come with some, lots of grief, lots of pain, but also lots of, core memories that we will hold near and dear um, with my grandfather. So thank you guys for your compassion and your condolences and all of that. I really do appreciate that. Thank you for the grace that you gave me last week to take a few days off. Didn't expect that this week we were going to be coming in fast and furious, right? We had a lot of news to break down yesterday and then today. Oh man, I have a lot of anxiety going into today's episode. Obviously, because this is a topic that I touched on back in April. It came with a lot of reactions from people. It came with a lot of heat that I took for some of the stuff that I had to say. I have no retractions to any of that. Everything that I said back in April, I stand by today. And it was funny because I woke up this morning and I had a text from Chef Stu, and he sent me this video. And it's the video that everybody's been sending me, but he sent me this video, which was of Real Housewife of Orange County star Tamra Judge announcing and revealing that she has autism. And the second that he sent it to me, right when I saw it, I was like, what is this? What is it? Because I was on TikTok last night. I was doing like mindless scrolling, which I feel like people are now talking about how people don't channel surf anymore. They like social scroll. And so that's what I was doing. Like instead of watching like a Netflix show or something, I just like kind of um happened to be scrolling on my phone. And I saw this video of this guy, and there's this this pastrami place here in Los Angeles that looked really good. And so I sent it to Stu because I'm like, you need to be doing more of this because we've been talking about like needing to go to something about her and try the sandwiches, which I tried my sandwich and I gave my review of the sandwich. But I want to actually try more of their sandwiches and go with Stu because he's like a real chef. I'm just, you know, I just talk crap, but he knows how to make crap, good crap, crap that tastes good. But so he sent me the video of Tamara. And immediately when I saw it and I was watching, I'm not touching this with a 10-foot pole. Like, I'm not gonna go there. I'm not gonna talk about this. Everything that I said, I said back in April, which was Autism Awareness Month, or every April is Autism Awareness Month. And I had a lot to say because Holly Madison from The Girls Next Door, known from the Playboy world, she now hosts a couple of different television shows about Playboy. Um, and so I was like, okay, Holly Madison, when she was promoting her latest television show, she had opened up in April about her later in life autism diagnosis and how it gave her a sense of meaning and it gave her purpose and understanding in her life. And we also had like Tallulah Willis, Bruce Willis and Demi Moore's daughter, who talked about, oh, autism, and I have autism, like, a lot of grown women that have platforms online. My DMs, sorry, not my DMs, my notifications just in general have been blowing up today because everybody wants me to talk about this. So I figured we would dedicate the podcast to it. But I just want to say I do have a lot of anxiety talking about this because this is something that hits home. It is something that is very personal, that means a lot to me, that has the difficult part about this is I actually happen to really like Tamra Judge. I know not a lot of people do, but I enjoy her on the show. I enjoy her as the villain of Real Housewives of Orange County. I've hung out with her socially when we all went to Vegas for Erica Jane's Bet It All on Blonde show, And afterwards, we were all hanging out and taking shots and filming TikTok videos together. And I've, met Tamara a handful of times in these social settings. I've had combos with her. I've, like I said, always been a fan of her on the show, even when, I don't love her behavior. I've always still been a fan of hers. And so this is challenging because it was different when it was Holly Madison or Tallulah Willis, because I don't know Holly Madison or Tallulah Willis. I've never met them in person. I've never had a one on one conversation with them. I've never taken shots with them. I've never hung out with them. And so this does become challenging because Teddy as well. I also like Teddy. You know, Teddy's been on this podcast. I've gotten to talk to her. That's what makes this very challenging. Is Tamra Judge went on Two Teas in a Pod and revealed that she had just finished a therapy session because she has recently been diagnosed with autism. And as many of you guys know, autism is something that is very close to my heart because not only does my brother Ethan have autism, he is 22 now and was diagnosed at the age of 3. Not only has it affected, my personal life with my brother and, been in our, something that we've lived with for nearly 2 decades now. He was diagnosed at 3, but obviously, there were some signs that we saw early on. Ethan is not going to his first therapy session right now. Ethan has had a number of extensive therapies since he was a child. Occupational therapy, speech therapy, ABA. We did a number of alternative therapies. I found him one of the top autism treatment doctors in the country. And he is a very expensive doctor. And we went through a series of lab testing to, really get an understanding of what was going on in Ethan's body and how to address that so that we were able to help him reach his fullest potential. And to this day, the conversations that I am able to have with someone like Tamra Judge or Holly Madison or Tallulah Willis will never be conversations that my brother and I will be able to have. He's just not, um, he language is or communication is certainly a barrier for him, right? I shared we just lost my grandfather, and last week was a challenging week for Ethan. Um, I don't know his level. I mean, he obviously understands, but I don't know his full level of awareness. But I did see his reaction to a lot of things, and there were tantrums. I remember Thursday night. Um, when my grandfather passed away and we were all there at the facility with him, because the hospice nurse had called us on Tuesday night and said that he had about 72 hours. So he finally passed away on Thursday. And Ethan had a challenging night. Obviously everybody was sad and mourning and grieving and crying. And Ethan was not crying. He was screaming. He was shouting. As soon as they took my grandfather's body, he was in the parking lot screaming at the top of his lungs and wasn't able to articulate how he felt, right? So that's challenging, right? We then got into the car right after that, and I was sitting in the back seat. My mother was on one side of Ethan, I was on the other side, and he continued to scream at the top of his lungs. Think of this. This is a 22-year-old young man screaming at the top of his lungs in the back seat of the car as we're trying to drive home because he's not able to articulate how he's feeling. He's not able to understand how he's feeling. That's the only way he knew how to express himself. And so, my mother and I were doing our best to try and calm him down and to try and get him to use his words to express himself, which is something that is a challenge for him sometimes, right? Um, so much so to I could even see the frustration in my mother. She's broken down having to just say goodbye to her father, and she's, a shell of herself as she's grieving and mourning and trying to process this and trying to understand her own emotions right now. And then she has Ethan who's screaming, and I can see, as patient as she was being with him, I can see the frustration coming out with her to the point where I had to be like, Ethan, enough. Like, okay, I understand. We have our feelings, and there are a lot of feelings, and they're big feelings. I go, but and I had to like really reason with him. And I had to say, Ethan, look at me, focus, eyes, so that we made eye contact, eyes, focus. Okay, let's take a deep breath. And one thing that he's able to relate to with my brother Elijah and I is that, we're grown men, right? And so that's one thing that I tell Ethan. And I'm like, Ethan, am I a man? And he says, yes. And I say, are you a man? And he says, yes. And so I was like, okay, well, grown men, we don't shout like this. If we want to express ourselves, we have to use our words. This is a 22-year-old man that I'm having a conversation with about this. Okay. It's a young man. it's very challenging sometimes. So it's hard when I see somebody like Tamra Judge, who's saying that the reason we see her lacking empathy on Real Housewives of Orange County is because she has autism. I know autism, right? And not only have we experienced this with my own family, but for people that are familiar or unfamiliar with my past, prior to being a full time content creator and podcaster, my past is in helping families affected by autism. I used to help run one of the largest national autism organizations in our country that not only helps people here in the United States, but also was able to help people internationally. I raised millions of dollars to help families impacted by autism, getting them access to medical treatment, covering lab testing, doctor's visits, doing a series of nutritional counseling, producing conferences throughout the US and internationally so that people that were of lower income had access to resources, had access to doctors and scientists that were really understanding what was going on inside the body, right? I know this very well. I've met a number of families, and I can tell you, even the families that had some of the most high functioning cases, because autism is obviously a spectrum. So you have the very severe side of the spectrum. I've seen those. I've seen and spoken to families and understand the pain of having to institutionalize your loved one, your son, your daughter, because that's the only option you feel you have left. That's a very severe case. And I also know the very high functioning cases, which at one point was considered Asperger's. And so Asperger's was a high functioning form of autism. I know those forms. And that's why it's challenging when somebody like Holly or Tamra or Tallulah wants to identify with that higher functioning side of the spectrum. I know Asperger's. I don't believe Asperger's is a term that is used in as well and or used anymore. However, what people don't understand about the autism spectrum is it's only recently been broadened, right? Broadened to the point where people like Tamra Judge can go and say, "Oh, I'm on the spectrum now," when they don't understand that the spectrum was a lot more narrow before, right? Again, even the most high functioning cases, those people were still not individuals that you would see on the Real Housewives of Orange County that would be in confessionals or that would be able to give a clap back at a table argument the way that we see some of these women do, or Tamra specifically. And again, this is really challenging because I do like Tamra, and on a person to person human level, I don't have any issue with Tamra, right? I understand the value that she brings to these shows, but to absolve yourself of accountability or responsibility and to hijack something that you don't fully even understand, understand the history of autism or how people like my brother struggle with this every day. He's struggled with it since he was a toddler, you know? And I've seen so many of these individuals. I even, because when I spoke out about it back in April, I got a lot of heat for that. And so I was like, okay, well, maybe my voice is not something that matters. But then I reached out to a lot of the families that I used to work with over the since I was, in high school. Um, and I reached out to them and said, "Hey, would you guys mind sharing your stories?" And I had them send in their videos, and they sent in their videos, and I released all of those videos, showing people don't listen to autism from my words, listen to them from these families that know it and that have lived with it their entire lives. These individuals that, you can see sometimes there are prompts where their parents are kind of like with Ethan. I'm like, "Ethan, are you a man?" Yes. Use your words. Like you have to guide them sometimes because communication, the barriers with that are very challenging for individuals like my brother. So I do, you know, it was interesting because I saw the clip on social media, and then I was like, "Okay, well, let me actually listen to the full context of what Tamara said on the podcast and what she and Teddy had said." And Tamara says that part of her autism diagnosis or part of her being on the spectrum comes with sensory issues, and so she's like, "I'm sensitive to light and sound and touch." And again, even hearing her say that, I'm like, "You're somebody that sits on a set in confessionals where you have lights on. I have lights on me right now. One, two, three lights, an overhead light, a LED light behind me, right? Light, sound, touch. I remember my brother throwing tantrums, screaming tantrums because his shirt became wet and he couldn't handle the touch, the sensory of the touch of his shirt being wet. So he would have screaming fits. He loved cars and trains, and if they were to ever get dirty or get mud on them, he would freak out. I remember getting so frustrated because he wouldn't wear his shoes. We would be out at, a baseball game for my brother Elijah, and we would be on the field, and Ethan would be trying to take off his clothes and take off his shoes. And I would be frustrated because obviously you're not supposed to allow a 5-year-old to be running around naked on a baseball field. And there were real challenge. I understand sensory issues, right? I know the families that struggled with sensory issues. To this day, when Ethan gets frustrated, he bangs his head into a wall. Do you know how scary that is? Do you know what that is like? To have somebody that you love get so frustrated that they can't articulate how they feel, that the best way for them to express themselves is to bang their head into a wall. That is somebody with a real barrier of communication. That is somebody that has true sound, sensory, touch issues, right? Ethan had to wear headphones because the sound, the sensory processing of the sound was too much. Me, when I'm in a crowd or I'm in a loud, arena or something, yeah, the sensory is a little much for me. Sensory overload is common for most people. Doesn't mean you have autism. I know autism sensory overload. I know sensitivity to light. I know sensitivity to touch. I know sensitivity to sound. And from what we have watched of Tamra Judge's life on Real Housewives of Orange County and Ultimate Girls Trip and seen of her at BravoCon and what I saw of her when I was taking shots with her in Las Vegas after Erica, that was a very loud club. Her and I were dancing just fine, taking shots at that club. There were lights, strobe lights. There were people. I mean, I have videos of that. I think I can even pull up one of the videos that I'll show you right now. And I can tell you, someone with autism, Ethan, my brother Ethan, would have a very challenging time in it. Oh, yep, here we go. Would have a very challenging time in an environment like this. Look at this is us in Vegas. It says Vegas, baby. There are lights. There are strobe lights. We're taking. There's Tamra dancing into the camera. Um, So for me, that's challenging because those environments are very overwhelming for a person, even on the higher end of the spectrum. She said she has social anxiety. I have social anxiety. I had social anxiety coming into today's live. That's why I'm not even looking at the live chat because I don't know if I'm ready to take on that feedback that I know people are going to have and people are going to disagree with me. And I understand that. Right. She said that she's very much a black and white thinker, as am I. I break things down black and white all the time. It's very different from the way Ethan sees the world in black and white. It's very different from, and listen, I also want to say I understand my brother is a male adult with autism. I know plenty of female adults with autism. I know plenty of parents that one of, someone that I have the utmost love and respect for is a woman named Kim Rossi. Okay. She wrote a book called All I Can Handle. She runs a blog called Age of Autism. She has 3 grown adult daughters with autism. Okay. I've known Kim for many years. I haven't talked to her in a very long time, just because life has taken us in different directions. And, obviously, my career has taken me into more of the content generation podcasting world versus the philanthropy work that I used to do. But, Kim is somebody that knows what it's like to experience a woman with autism. She has 3 grown adult women that now have autism. She had to care for them as they were growing up. They have autism. I'm sure, well, I know because I can see her. I mean, a lot of the moms and the dads and the families that I used to work with, they respond to all of my social media posts every time I've talked about this issue. And I've avoided this issue for a while because I needed to kind of get away from the heaviness that came with that. I had to really make my family the priority and I needed a break from being on the ground, in talking to families and going to all these events. Like at some point you do need some separation because it can weigh very heavily on you. And I needed to take a break from that world. I gave all of my 20s to that world, that I needed my family to now become the priority. And so I needed to walk away from that. But I understand autism very well. I understand women and adult women with autism. I understand adult men with autism. I've met them, many of them on all ends of the spectrum. And I think the issue now, again, has become that the spectrum has become so widened and become so broad that it's allowed for people like Tamra or Holly Madison or Tallulah Willis to then come into this. And and be like, "Oh, well, I have this and this gives my life meaning. This gives my life purpose." Fuck that. You think autism gives my brother purpose? You think he feels like his life has been given meaning? You think he understands himself better because of this? That is a fucking insult. A fucking insult. The audacity. And I see the pain in these mothers' eyes, in these fathers' eyes, in these siblings' eyes. I have a number of other content creator friends who will text me privately and they'll thank me because they have relatives in their own family. They won't say it publicly. They don't want to touch that topic because they don't want to take the heat that comes from that. However, this is I don't have an issue with Tamra personally, but I do have an issue with her not understanding autism. And the reality is the same way you're very easily able to go and get an Ozempic medication, an Ozempic prescription. It's just as easy these days to get an autism diagnosis. You can go on TikTok, and there are a number of people on TikTok that are self-diagnosed with autism. They took a test on the internet, and that test on the internet, my brother doesn't have the level of awareness to understand what it means to go on the internet and to take a random test and to answer the questions and to understand what the questions mean and to read the criteria and then to self-identify with that. He doesn't have that luxury. He doesn't have the luxury of going on his top number one podcast and talking about how he sees the world so black and white and talk about his experience with light and touch and sound. And Tamara says that a lot of this is linked to her trauma. My brother doesn't understand the concept of trauma. That's a very dense concept, right? That is very challenging for a lot of people to understand. And unfortunately, we've broadened these terms so much that we just, you know, I mean, I understand it's the same way people are like, oh my God, I can't focus. I have ADHD. It's like, no, you just are overwhelmed with the number of social media and the number of stuff that's coming at you that, yeah, you get distracted easily. That doesn't automatically mean you have ADHD. Oh, you like things organized and you're very particular about how you like things organized. One, that doesn't mean you have autism, nor does that mean you have OCD. It's not debilitating, right? And I get it. Trauma makes sense. If Tamara has trauma that she's trying to process and experience, that makes sense. Autism does not make sense. I've watched this woman on television for years. I have not seen a single trait of autism. I've seen a number of people with autism, more than I'm sure you have. Um, well, I mean, I'm sure there are a number of therapists and teachers that are out there, and I know a lot of them DM me and thank me for when I talk about this issue because they see it, they know it firsthand. You know, it's tough. Even in the podcast on Two T's in a Pod, Teddy was like, "Oh yeah, you're really good at reading people." Again, does not meet the definition of if you're good at reading people, that tells me that you haven't understand like, it's so wild to me, her and she has a lack of empathy, and that's what, you know, makes sense because of this autism diagnosis. I'm like, when Vicky lost her mother, you had empathy for her, did you not? Because that's a perfect example of grief, right? Loss and grief and somebody that has emotions, and you try to process that, right? That is a level of awareness. That is not a lack of empathy, that is an expression of empathy. Again, my brother didn't take the moment to ask my mom, "Mom, are you okay? Can I give you a hug? Because you just lost your father last week." No, he was shouting at the top of his lungs because he didn't even know how to process his own emotions. That's the reality of autism. So it is a fucking insult. I'm sorry. It is absolutely an insult. I will stand by that. I will 10 toes down, say it with my whole chest. I stand on that. And I say this on behalf of many women and men with autism, teenagers, children, families, all impacted by this. I know them all too well. That's not to say that I speak for everyone. I'm not the voice of autism. I'm not a face of autism. I don't try to be. I don't want to be, nor do I want to make my brother. It was so funny. I remember when I talked about it in April, and then there was some woke white bitches in the comments that wanted to be like, "Oh my god, does your brother consent to you talking about him and his autism diagnosis on the internet?" I'm like, "Bitch, if my brother understood the concept of consent, I would get on my knees and thank Jesus every fucking day." I do thank Jesus every day. I thank the Lord that my brother is healthy and well, but that doesn't mean that there aren't still obstacles that he has to face every single day that he will have to face for the rest of his life. He doesn't get to go and book himself a therapy session and take and drive himself there. Ethan doesn't drive. Ethan probably will never drive. That's the reality of his condition. That doesn't mean that people with autism can't drive, right? Because I do know others that take the bus and are doing well. But like, again, one of my mother's friends that we've known for years who also has an adult son with autism, he's very much a black and white thinker, right? He lacks empathy. He's a grown adult. He can go to work. He can take the bus by himself. He has a program that he's in. However, and I don't want to get into personal details, but like we were all having this conversation prior to Tamara coming out, but we're having these conversations about like what it's like and what Ethan's journey is now that he's an adult and he's aged out of the school system. And we have to look at the reality of what the rest of his life is going to look like. And then we have, family friend and her son who's about Ethan's age because they grew up together, but very different levels, right? He's more on the higher end of the spectrum. Ethan's not, and she still has challenges with him. And like, and she was even saying because they were going through a very difficult family situation themselves. And she asked him, she was like, "How are you feeling about this?" And he's like, "I'm fine." And she's like, "Okay, like, you don't have," and he's like, "No, I'm good." And it was a very heavy family situation, and she was talking about how sometimes she was grateful that he had that lack of empathy because then, she wouldn't have to worry about him and his feelings. Obviously, he gets frustrated in certain instances, but, like, there are very black and white thinkers like that, where this very heavy family situation, it doesn't directly impact his daily life, right? He's still gonna wake up, he's still gonna do this and whatever, and so he's still going to follow his daily routine, but that lack of empathy is very clear. So again, I know men and women with autism, and I cannot, someone like Holly Madison and Tamra Judge have been on television for many years. I've watched them and I've watched their lives, and I've not seen a single trait of autism. And if they're able to mask it that well, then that does make me question the reality of the severity of that diagnosis. And yeah, I just said that out loud, 10 toes down, chest out. I said that. I know this. I've lived with it for the last, 20, 22 years now. And so it's hard because I'm like, well, because at one point, and I was talking to Tamara recently about coming on the podcast, and I remember in April, people asked me if I would have Holly Madison on my podcast, and at one point, Holly was booked, and we were working on scheduling, and she was very difficult to schedule, and she didn't want to drive here, and she didn't want to go to this studio, and her schedule this, and blah blah blah, and she's very difficult to schedule. I'll tell you that. And so ultimately, we didn't move forward with the interview, and then April came, and she went on a press tour about her autism diagnosis. And that's when, for me, I was kind of like, well, now I really would never want to have her on my podcast. I don't know her personally. I don't need to know her personally. I don't need to have her on my podcast. I'm good. Right. The part that's a little more difficult with Tamara is, again, I do like Tamara. I understand the value she brings to OC. We were talking about having her come on No Filter after the reunion. We're now post reunion. And part of me is like, would I rescind the same invite that I took back from Holly Madison, would I no longer want to have Tamara on my podcast? And I thought about that this morning and I said, no, I don't, I wouldn't turn down that invitation as long as we both came into the conversation with an open mind and an open heart. And I want to hear her out. I would love to hear her out and hear her side of things, but I also want her to understand my side of things, and the number of families that don't claim that diagnosis, but were given that diagnosis since they were children because it was so obvious and they needed services, they needed therapies, they needed the regional centers to address these issues, right? They needed that diagnosis, not to give them purpose or meaning or understanding of themselves, but because it was debilitating for them every day. They needed speech therapy, they needed occupational therapy, they needed ABA, they needed these therapies, not a one-on-one therapy session with your with a therapist, to talk through your feelings. Like, it's just the comparison is wild to me. The fact that there's even a comparison is wild to me. I get it. She has trauma, and I don't want to negate that. And I don't want to negate any quirks or qualms that she may be experiencing on a daily basis. I have a number of quirks. I have a number of issues that, could technically fall under the umbrella of autism. It's how people are so easily able to self diagnose themselves like they do on WebMD. I get that. But I also have a level of understanding of being like, listen, that's autism. I may have some of these quirks that may technically fall under that umbrella term. However, I'm not going to say I'm on the spectrum. Not because I don't want to be, but because I think it's disrespectful for the people that live with this. Any of us can have a number of different traits that we can identify that are relatable to autism or relatable to being on the spectrum. I remember I did this podcast interview recently, and I didn't even expect to talk about this, but she ended up asking me a lot about it. And I remember she bless her heart, it was sheer ignorance. It wasn't because she was genuinely trying to be offensive. But I remember at one point, she was like, "Well, aren't we like all kind of on the autism spectrum?" And I just looked at her and I was like, I don't think that's how that works. But and she's like, "Oh no, I thought like we're all kind of on the spectrum." No, I'm like, no, that's not really how that works. There's a diagnostic criteria. It's going in that direction, right? Where we're broadening it so much that anybody can just kind of jump onto that. But it's like, to me, it's such an insult to see people that, I mean, to see grown adults in diapers. That's the reality of the severe side of the spectrum. Grown adults in diapers, people that are having to institutionalize their loved ones. That's the reality. It's a sad, harsh reality that people don't want to look at and don't want to talk about. And so, my thing is, how do you, someone like you, Tamra Judge, say that you can identify with being on the spectrum when the other end of the spectrum is an adult in a diaper that's having to be institutionalized, that needs 24/7 care? I, again, quirks and all, trauma and all, sensory issues and all, for me personally, would never put myself on that spectrum. No matter how much they try to open up that or widen that spectrum, I would never put myself on that spectrum. Not because I would be embarrassed, but because I would think it was an insult to people that are actually diagnosed on that spectrum and that have lived with this their whole life. It's a fucking insult. I say that 10 toes down. I would love to have a conversation with Tamra. I'm sure we can come to some common ground. I'm sure we can relate and understand each other. I would love for her to meet my family. I would love for her to meet my brother. I would love for her to meet my mother and have her say those words to my mom that she's on the autism spectrum. And listen, my mom would hug her. My mother would embrace her. My mother just opened up her own little coffee business. My mother would welcome her in, give her some coffee, throw some adaptogens in it, maybe even give her a cocktail and have a drink with her. My mother would have no ill will to her. But I would love to see Tamara Judge come to my mother and tell my mother, next to my brother with autism, that she understands autism and relates to it because she's also on the spectrum. There, I open myself up to the live chat. um, Before I do, let's just do a quick ad read, and then we'll see what other news we have to touch on. That's all I have to say about that. Um, yeah. While we're talking about health, interesting segue. But I guess while we're on the topic of health, Mochi, very grateful to have Mochi be a sponsor of this podcast and to sponsor this episode. Mochi is a telehealth platform that connects patients seeking medication based weight loss treatment with board certified doctors and dietitians to help them determine the best option to accomplish that goal. Their program is completely virtual, meaning that you can access their services anywhere in the United States, and you'll be meeting with their team online because you deserve doctors that listen. They are dedicated to providing holistic, patient centered care that prioritizes overall well being with the goal of transforming how weight management is approached for you specifically. Mochi Health takes a holistic approach to weight loss that includes visits with board certified doctors, nutrition consultations, and medication delivered to your door. I'm talking about science backed medications, including GLP 1s like Ozempic and others that I'm sure you've heard of on the market. We know how much our housewives love Ozempic. This is your chance to talk to a doctor and see if that's an option that is right for you. It's affordable and accessible regardless of your insurance coverage. With Mochi, their dietitians work hand in hand with your medications to create personalized nutrition plans that fit your lifestyle. Reach your weight loss goals with science backed, FDA approved GLP 1 medications, support from real doctors, and guidance from registered dietitians. Help with making life easier and health sustainable. You can achieve the results that you want by going to joinmochi.com. Joinmochi.com. Mochi is spelled Mochi. Get started at joinmochi.com. Use code NOFILTER for $40 off. That's code NOFILTER for $40 off. Get started today at joinmochi.com. Whew. Oof, 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 oof. Okay. Shall we look at the live chat? Danny says the title of this episode says it all. Dawn says it seems like she's trying to save face right now. I understand people that may not be empathetic, but I would not state that after one therapy session that they were able to diagnose anything. Well, my understanding is that she received her diagnosis and then went into a therapy session to try and address that diagnosis. And this was her first time addressing it. I don't know. Paige says, I'll bring my 2 adult sons with autism. Yeah. Laura says, I just want to have coffee with Nancy just for fun. Yeah. Um, yeah. Pamela says, me too, Zach. He would laugh at her. He would laugh her out of the room. He's brutally honest, no filter. Yeah. It's just, it's tough. I don't think autism is the move for her to make at a time like this. Spot on, Zach. Disgusting disrespect and an absolute disgrace for bad behavior. I don't like that that's that's the association. Again, I like Tamra. I do. I've hung out with her. I like her as a person. I enjoy watching her on television. This is just one line I can't allow her to cross, though. I'm sorry. I can't defend this. I can't stand by this. I didn't want to talk about this until my DMs and my comments and my notifications, they were all blowing up with people wanting me to talk about this. And I was like, okay, I can't avoid this. I need to talk about this. I'm a little scared of reaction on social media. It's just, the last thing I want to do is um, have to deal with people's commentary about all of this. Pamela says, I believe we all have autism to some degree. This is her trying to get it. I don't believe we all have autism to some degree. I disagree with that statement, Pamela. I do not believe that we all have autism to some degree. And I think it's very dangerous if we widen the spectrum to that level. I don't identify as being on the spectrum. I'm sure there are certain diagnostic criteria where if you tilt your head and squint your eyes and say, I feel this, you can find yourself on that spectrum. Out of respect to people that I know that have autism, even the ones that may not like me, out of respect to them, I would never put myself in that same category because my life is not impacted in the way that their lives are. So I disagree with the statement that we all have autism to some degree. And I think to say that is disrespectful to people that actually have autism, many of which I know. I mean, but here's the thing. I would feel the same way about, if it were Erica Jane, right? She said she lacked empathy last season. And if she recently came out and she said, guys, guess what? I now have autism, I would be like, Erica, no, 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 no. That is not the move we make. But I think Erica has a little more self awareness and would never actually, you know, do that. Um, yeah. Lori says maybe she should have a conversation with Jacqueline Larita. I think Tamara doesn't fully understand her said diagnosis and should have explored it before she announced it. I agree. I think she thought that this would maybe give her some sense of, I don't know. I really don't know what her purpose and I mean, I feel like when people come out with these diagnoses, it's a bit attention seeking. Um, and I feel like it was a way for her to try and excuse some of her behavior. When here's the reality. If you're on a reality show, you get caught up in the game sometimes, right? Lisa Renna did it. I think a lot of people, you get caught up in the game and sometimes you do things that you maybe normally wouldn't do. Doesn't mean you have autism. If Lisa Rinna came out and said, "I have autism, guys, that's why I was acting the way that I was acting. That's why I came after Kathy is because I'm such a black and white thinker. I only think in black and white, and that's why I have a lack of empathy is because, that's why I came after Kathy and Aspen." I'd be like, "Lisa Rinna, no. You got caught up in the game, right? It was exciting. You were playing. The audience was rooting you on for, how you came at Kim Richards and all of that stuff. And like, then you lost the plot. At some point, you just have to say, the game ate me. I got a little too consumed and too caught up in it. And I did things that were out of character for me and let that be. I've talked to Jacqueline Loretta. Jacqueline and I are friends. We've talked about it. I'm sure a lot of people are also sending her that same message. I think Jacqueline has a little more of a I don't want to say a softer approach, but she has a lot more empathy. I have empathy. I definitely think I have empathy. I just will say 10 toes down. That's a fucking insult. And I don't think Jacqueline would ever say that. I think, Jacqueline would come at it from a sweeter place just based off of, you know, me knowing her. Um, yeah, we were talking about trying to get together to go get Botox from Dr. Jen Armstrong, actually. I was like, "Yeah, let's go. Let's go, get a Botox touch up," because now Jacqueline lives in OC and I'm in LA and um, uh, I go to OC to go see Dr. Jen. So I was thinking of bringing Jacqueline in next time I went. So yeah, we talk often. Tiffany says, "Unfortunately, Zach, you are a voice for autism, and they are lucky to have you stand up and speak for people who cannot. We love you." I appreciate you saying that. I don't think I'm a voice for autism because I think they are, they have their own voice. I can just be a voice for somebody that's a sibling that has a relative with autism. Um, but yeah, Pamela B says lack of empathy does not equal autism. I agree. Olivia Lara says, coming from a behavioral therapist who works with children with autism, I need more proof that Tamra, because lacking empathy, girl, same. That doesn't solidify your diagnosis. What a cop out. Thank you, Olivia. I like when the therapists and the teachers and the moms and the dads, everyone comes out and they share their experiences because it is a true insult. I may need a minute, but I'm definitely still open to having Tamra come on this show and having that conversation. And I think if anything, I'm somebody that can conduct that interview with her and can maybe get her to come out on the other side. We can meet in the middle. And maybe in some way, the audience will get to see her take some accountability, understand her actions, and, maybe win them over again. Sarah Betancourt says it's a big trigger for me. So proud for Zach. Thank you. It's triggering for me. I don't want to come on this platform and talk about this. I don't want to address this. Like, this is heavy and, not a fun combo for me to be having. But here we are. Great point, Zach. Erica never came up with an excuse. She simply didn't have empathy for the things she needed it for. And I think she does have empathy, right? I think most people do have empathy. Maybe there are moments where they lack empathy, just like anxiety, right? Like I have anxiety. Am I somebody that identifies as having anxiety like full time? No, but I have moments where I get anxiety. I get social anxiety. I get sensory overwhelm. I get, moments where I'm a little OCD because I like things organized a certain way or whatever. Like I have my patterns. Like we all have quirks, right? We all have these little things that, you know, make us unique. Doesn't mean we have one of these diagnoses. That doesn't mean I'm going to say I have depression because sometimes I get sad. Doesn't mean I'm going to say I have anxiety because sometimes I get anxious. Those are moments for me, right? Other people, I'm sure, I can't take that experience away from them because they have debilitating depression or debilitating anxiety, you know? Oh, oof, 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 oof. It's just ooh, oh my goodness, my stepmother just responded. She said, "What the fuck?" She saw that Tamra, um, revealed her autism diagnosis. I'm not sure if I wanna reach out to Tamra or reach out to Teddy. Um, I don't know if I'm ready for that. Um, I don't know. If one of them reaches out to me before I reach out to them, listen, the invite stands to still have her on the podcast. If we can make that happen and do something good with this, I would love to do that. Um, I would as offensive as it is to me and as offensive I think it is to my brother, I'm still willing to have that conversation and to do it on the podcast and let everyone watch and learn and let this be a learning experience from all of us. I'm good. Are you? Says Zach. If she comes on your show, remember OC has a cast member get fake documentation saying that they had cancer. I wouldn't trust anything from I don't think Tamara would go that far. Listen, and if she would, then that shows you her, right? You will make her look stupid, Zach. I love your positivity. I wouldn't make her look stupid. I would just hope like, it's hard, like, seeing my stepmom right now react and say, "What the fuck? WTF?" I'm like, "Yeah, I know," because while my mother has been trying to handle all of the, services and the I don't wanna say fallout, but, like, all the things that you have to handle when you lose a loved one, my mother's the one that's handling the loss of my grandfather, that's her father. She's having to she had the power of attorney, like, she's having to address all of that. And that's stressful. She's having to buy an outfit that he's going to wear in the casket. Like she's doing all of these things that take a lot out of her. So my brother's been with my stepmother and she's been having to work and take care of him at the same time. And that's a challenge. My stepmother knows autism, so it is insulting. Um, yeah. She's not going to be honest. She's doing this now because everyone hates her. Listen, I think she will be honest, and I'm giving her the grace enough to say, "Hey, you have an opportunity to acknowledge and maybe take back, not take back your diagnosis. I don't want to take away your experience, but I still want to give you the grace to maybe say, hey, maybe I jumped on this train a little too quickly without fully understanding. And now that you've helped me have this heart to heart moment, I think that we can have, I can understand. I don't know. I just from my interactions with her, I do believe that she is somebody that is capable of taking accountability, capable of admitting when she's wrong, and able to, learn from something like this. The best person for her to have that combo with is you. I'm open and willing to have that combo. Paige says Tamara has no clue all the IEPs, doctors, therapists, school meetings, and on and on. Yeah, yeah. I trust me. I understand. I understand. Listen, the reason my brother wasn't able to move into the next adult services program is because he's not high functioning enough. So that's why he is spending so much time with my stepmother right now, and why my mom has to, find ways to keep him occupied. And like I said, she just opened up her coffee business, so she tries to bring him in to work and to help, and and that's challenging because he doesn't want to work. He doesn't understand, and so it's fighting for services. Yep, Robin, fighting for services, jumping through hoops, feeding therapy. Yep. 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 Feeding tubes. Yep. Very real. I would love to see that interview with Tamara. You may not want to leave a live chat on. We wouldn't do a live interview. We would probably tape it in studio. I wouldn't want to do it virtual because I would want to have like an in person. The chemistry in person is just very different, you know? TK says, my son is 33 and has infantile autism. So I have a major problem with Tamara and others weaponizing autism. I wouldn't say that they weaponize it. I think that they um, are using it for like a sense of self importance or a sense to absolve themselves of accountability. It's like telling people their doctors can't focus to get Adderall. Yeah. And then when they don't actually have ADHD. Yep. Yep. They're not educated on it. I agree, and that's why, again, I'm willing to give a little grace. I didn't really wanna give as much grace to, like, Tallulah or Holly, and now I feel like now that this is somebody that I at least have a direct line of communication with, I'm willing to give that same grace and to try to meet in the middle. Any reason why she didn't tell Eddie about this first? Why is the No, I believe she told Eddie. This was just her way of saying it publicly. But again, I do think it's related to the heat that she's taking on the show, which I think is an unfortunate and unfair reason to lean into this. Okay, I do have to wrap because I do have to head into studio to tape the pop report. I didn't really want to touch on any other news. I didn't think one there was anything major or groundbreaking. Yes, see, Ange says, I honestly feel like so many people use autism as a trend and it's disgusting. Take 90 Day Fiance, for example. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for the positivity towards autism. We need your uh help getting the states to provide housing. This will be a crisis for this will be a crisis in 10 years. It's a crisis now. Okay. It is a crisis now. Nora Thirdburr on X. And she says that it's so one thing. So one charity. So last year I hosted a poker tournament in Illinois. We raised a lot of money, a lot of money. And that money was raised for Home Life Community, which my brother Ethan, his doctor, Dr. Jerry Cartzenell, has a charity called Home Life Community that's working to provide housing and adult services for adults, not just with autism, but with those developmental disorders. They're looking to build a facility in Tennessee right now. So that is a charity that you can support. Home Life Community, homelifecommunity.org. If you want to send love, you can say it's on behalf of me, on behalf of the Zack Pack, on behalf of Ethan. If anybody wants to spread some love, it's called Home Life Community. Home Life Community. I'll put it www.homelifecommunity.org. That way you can see it. Home Life Community. Show them some love. When you make a donation, you can let them know that you're part of the Zack Pack, that you're sending this donation on behalf of me and Ethan, or on behalf of your own loved one. Like I'm not asking you to do it in my name by any means. I'm just saying if you want to give something, even if it's $5, right? They would absolutely appreciate any bit only because that's what Nora brought up on the on X in my mentions. She said that housing is gonna be a crisis. Absolutely. It will absolutely be a crisis. It's becoming a crisis. I mean, again, my brother's at that age now. Luckily, he has my mother that he can still live with, but, there are so many people that don't have other loved ones to pass their children off to, and the unfortunate part is the reality is, if they don't have anybody to live with, they become wardens of the state, and that's scary. So, you can do something if you want. Sydney says, yes, the live chat was fired up today. Thank you. I didn't read the live chat for most of it until the very end. So thank you. Jen says, thank you. And my hugs and heart go out to you and yours at this time. Bless you, Zach. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. My brother's 37 now. Hard to believe. Wow. Yeah. It's, all of these kids that were kids 20 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, they're aging out. That's a reality that we're facing with my brother. Mari says, I like how you talk about autism awareness and talk about it in a way that's informative. Katie Wright says 100%. Thank you, Katie. Love you, Katie. Erica E says, this is not a trend or a viral soundbite. Media, please support and talk to families that deal with this daily. I cast no judgment, and I understand there is a spectrum. One positive thing is that it's bringing awareness. Yeah, that is true. It is bringing awareness. It was interesting, though, because there was also it was also, oh, someone just DM'd me too. I saw in your post about the real housewife who claimed autism. As someone with autism herself, there are times I wish I could take it away or at least replace it with a mental. Oh God, this is gonna make me cry. Because like, listen, this is somebody that like actually has autism and can articulate that and can share her experience. Um, which shows that she's on the higher end of the spectrum, like the higher functioning side of the spectrum. And if she takes issue with this, that is, you know, I just I can't with some of this sometimes, some of these people like Holly or like all these TikTokers that want to self-identify. Um, Phoenix says, as a fellow family that struggles, I commend you. I see you. I respect you. And I thank you. Thank you. I see you too. Listen, the reason I talk about this is because I see you and I feel you. All right. My nephew went to a special college in Canada to teach him life skills. Yeah. Uh, Sharon Watch says, I learned a lot about autism on your podcast. Thank you. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. Thank you for seeing me. Thank you. I mean, I'm sharing all of this um, in hopes that this does bring light to it. The heavier sides of autism people don't want to talk about. So it's tough for me when I see people like Holly Madison being celebrated and people like, oh my God, you're so brave. You're so brave. I'm like, do you think I wish my brother, could host multiple television shows and write 2 New York Times bestselling books and headline his own reality show and go on a media press tour where he talks about his autism diagnosis and how it's given him meaning and purpose. I wish it did give him meaning and purpose. It makes things challenging, right? That's the hard part. Candy Simo says, as a mother of an autistic son, I'm having a hard time believing and understanding Tamara saying she's on the spectrum. It just sounds like excuses to me and it's offensive. Pamela says, I'm in tears right now. It's tough. Thank you for shining a light on this. Thank you. Thank you, guys. I appreciate you. Love you. I do have to run and I'm sorry. But listen, I gave you a full hour and we really, really hashed this out. Um, I have to go take the pop apart right now. I have to run out and I have to run out in like 20 minutes. Okay. I love you guys. I appreciate you. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. And I'll talk to you again tomorrow. Please support Home Life Community, homelifecommunity.org, if you want to show some love to help individuals like my brother that are going to need a place to live one day and that need these services. That's kind of the next chapter, the next reality that we're facing. So if you want to support, if you do, please share and let me know that you love, support, and I'll shout you out, whatever you need. Homelifecommunity.org. That is homelifecommunity.org. Have a wonderful rest of your day, guys. Happy Tuesday. Talk to you later. Talk to you tomorrow. But yes, I love you. Utica says, I understand that people misspeak and say things that need retraction, but this is clearly an intentional attention grab. That's what it feels like. Unfortunately, that's what it feels like, which is disappointing considering, like I said, I've talked to Tamra. I have a lot of respect for what she's brought to Real Houses of Orange County, but this is not the move. So I love you guys. I appreciate you. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Keep up with me at Just Been Zack. Keep up with the podcast at No Filter with Zack, and I will talk to you guys tomorrow. All right. Ciao for now. Bye.